The beast moved like smoke across the valley floor. Silent, effortless, inevitable. Its exoskeleton shimmered faintly in the moonlight of Ithrak 7, its claws coated in the blood of half a dozen species. No heartbeat, no emotion, only instinct. For the apex hunters, that was enough. They had ruled the stars for millennia not through civilization, not through science, but by perfecting the hunt. Predators elevated beyond evolution, sculpted by genetic rights and blood trials. Their purpose wasn't conquest. It was culling. They believed in balance. Kill the weak, leave only the strong. Across 13 sectors, they were legend. Entire civilizations whispered their name before extinction. Those who tried to resist vanished. Not a single successful retaliation had ever been recorded. The hunters didn't just kill. They erased. Every year, the Hunt Council selected a new prey. Tribes from across the stars would descend upon a chosen system, compete in score and take trophies. But this time, they picked wrong. They chose Earth. Humanity hadn't yet crossed deep space. They weren't even considered part of the galactic map. A few science vessels, some long-range probes, and a growing curiosity. But curiosity paints a target. One of those probes scanned too close to a hunter nesting zone. The response was immediate. A lone human survey ship disappeared first. Then another, followed by a colony outpost that sent only static before silence. At first, Earth Command suspected natural disasters, maybe solar flares. But then came the recovered logs. Grainy footage of massive multi-limb predators tearing through reinforced hulls as if they were paper. Fast, coordinated, efficient. Entire crews wiped out in under 5 minutes. One video, only 18 seconds long, showed a young technician trying to seal a blast door. Something dragged him backwards so fast, the camera didn't register the movement. Just a blur, then blood. The apex hunters didn't send messages. They didn't announce war. They stalked, killed, and moved on. And in their eyes, humanity was prey, an easy one. Soft-bodied bipeds. Emotionally volatile. Fragile. Unworthy. But humans are something no algorithm ever properly categorized. Unpredictable. Chaotic. And perhaps worst of all, for the hunters, adaptable. The first official response came from the Terran Science Council, not the military. Analysts pored over fragmented data, scanning predator behavior, anatomy, weaponry. There were no weaknesses, at least none obvious. No centralized nervous system. No predictable formations. They hunted alone or in small units. And they never repeated the same strategy twice. One Admiral Eric Talon summed it up during a secure briefing. We're not fighting soldiers. We're fighting God with claws. That statement was supposed to instill caution. Instead, it sparked fire. Across human space, an unspoken challenge spread. If gods wanted a hunt, they get one. A dozen planetary governments sent reinforcements to the outpost sectors. Civilians volunteered for evac duty. Engineers upgraded freighters with kinetic barriers and point defense weapons. Farmers retrofitted harvesters into mobile bunkers. No one waited for orders. Humanity didn't declare war. They prepared for it quietly, efficiently, furiously. Then came the message. Untraceable, audio only, a guttural voice layered with multiple tones. You will run. You will scream. You will die. We have come. Earth Command tried to jam the signal. Too late. It played across every channel, in every language, for 1 full hour. Some called it a psychological attack, but the message had the opposite effect. Recruitment tripled overnight. What the hunters never understood was the human mind under pressure, not the fear, the clarity, the way people stopped asking why and started asking how. How do we kill them? How do we fight back? What do they bleed? Another scout ship vanished near the Eridanus Drift, but this one sent partial telemetry before destruction. That data changed everything. Infrared scans revealed that while the hunters were invisible to most optics, their biology emitted a very specific heat signature when exerting force. A signature just outside the range of standard sensors, but within reach of industrial thermal imaging. Within days, cargo drones were retrofitted to scan for those bursts. The first successful counter came from an unarmed mining vessel. Spotting the flicker of heat, the crew detonated a cargo bay full of fuel canisters. One hunter confirmed dead. It wasn't much, but it proved the impossible. They could be killed. Back in the void, the hunters watched. For the first time, they slowed their advance. Not out of fear yet, but curiosity. Prey wasn't supposed to adapt. Prey wasn't supposed to retaliate. They adjusted their tactics, began probing for human weaknesses. Attacks came at random, on scattered planets, never the same place twice. Sometimes during the night, sometimes in broad daylight, but humans recorded everything. Every engagement added to a growing behavioral database. The more chaos the hunters unleashed, the more patterns emerged. Eventually, Earth intelligence formed a theory. The hunters weren't a monolith. They were fragmented clans, competing for dominance. Each victory earned rank. Each trophy fueled reputation. That made them vulnerable, not physically, but psychologically. Pride could be exploited. So humanity did something insane. They baited a trap, a mock distress signal, a false convoy of medical freighters. In reality, a heavily armed fleet with experimental ECM jammers and prototype plasma mines. The hunters took the bait. 6 of them entered the kill zone. Only 1 escaped. The others were reduced to charred limbs and acid smoke. 1 left behind a broken claw, intact enough to study. And when scientists analyzed its alloy-tipped sheath, they found human genetic material. Not from the battle. Older, preserved, studied. The truth hit hard. The hunters had encountered humans before. Not recent, not modern, but old, ancient, before the dawn of civilization. They had been watching us evolve. Suddenly, it all made sense. The proximity of their hunting grounds. The way they stalked Earth's fringe. We weren't a random target. We were a test. A species raised for the ultimate hunt. They had waited until we were ready. But something changed. They expected panic. Collapse. Instead, they got resistance. Strategy. Fire. Humans didn't run. They dug in. The hunt had begun. And this time, the prey was fighting back. Admiral Reyes didn't blink when the footage finished. The room was silent. Static buzz on the edge of every holoscreen. Across from him sat generals, scientists, civilian leaders, all watching the same thing. A hunter claw punching through a reinforced alloy wall, like wet clay. He leaned forward and said, "We stopped thinking like soldiers, start thinking like survivors. We don't win by matching their strength. We win by removing their advantage." His order was simple. Shift every resource toward counterpredator warfare. Within hours, Earth's orbital factories were producing new detection satellites. Civilian engineers, private corporations, even asteroid miners were mobilized. Entire sectors went dark, not out of fear, but to deny the hunters their preferred battleground. Confusion. The hunters expected brute force. Instead, they found silence. No signals. No energy spikes. No panic refugees. Their prey had gone still. What they didn't know was that humans had watched predators before. On Earth, in jungles, deserts, oceans. Evolution taught humans one thing better than any other species: how to study a killer and then kill it better. Analysis teams began breaking down every encounter. Hunters moved in arcs, never straight. Preferred high ground. Avoided open water. They communicated via low-frequency pulses. They marked territory with acidic enzymes. That enzyme, it turned out, could be traced with common industrial solvents. Suddenly, the battlefield flipped. Humans could predict their movement. Outposts stopped waiting to be attacked. They went hunting. The first deliberate strike happened on Harkon 3, a mining moon already evacuated. A 5-person recon team tracked enzyme traces through the slag tunnels. They set motion-triggered sound cannons tuned to hunter frequencies, forcing the creature into a choke point. What followed wasn't a firefight. It was execution. After the kill, the body was recovered, barely, laced with fail-safes. The corpse tried to dissolve itself using internal acids, but not fast enough. Samples were taken, bones analyzed, blood scanned. The autopsy confirmed it. The hunters were bioengineered, not naturally evolved. Their nervous systems weren't just fast, they were artificially accelerated. Layers of redundant muscle fiber, shock-absorbing cartilage, armor fused with metal. Someone or something designed them to be unstoppable. But humans had seen unstoppable things before. They called them challenges. On Earth, in the early 21st century, a microchip the size of a fingernail had revolutionized adaptive computing. Now, centuries later, that same concept was reborn in Echo, a battlefield AI capable of analyzing combat data in real time and adjusting tactics mid-conflict. Echo was tested during a simulated hunter ambush on a derelict freighter. Within 90 seconds, it had redirected drone fire, sealed 3 escape hatches, and triggered a hull breach to vent the attacker into space. That test wasn't just a success. It was a message. Humans weren't just learning. They were evolving. The next hunter attack came at Station Vargo, a floating medical hub in deep orbit. 2 of them breached the hull. They expected panic, screams, running. What they got instead were zero-gravity corridors rigged with adaptive mines keyed to temperature shifts. Echo rerouted the life support flow, freezing the interior to sub-zero in 40 seconds. When one of the hunters tried to escape through the maintenance shaft, it hit a kinetic stasis trap, a human invention designed for rogue asteroids. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Both hunters dead. No human casualties. The Apex Council received a report. For the first time in recorded history, they hesitated. One elder proposed withdrawal. Another demanded escalation. But the ruling hunter, called Skarnthrex, refused. He issued a declaration to all clans. The prey has teeth. Tear deeper. And so they did. A wave of attacks unlike anything before. 12 colonies struck in 8 hours. Not clean surgical kills, slaughters. Children, medics, unarmed workers. Psychological warfare. The hunters had shifted from sport to rage. But humans didn't break. They hardened. Civilian defense programs expanded overnight. Subterranean shelters were retrofitted with internal drone launchers. Public schools were converted into command hubs. Farmers worked alongside AI technicians. Chemists studied hunter acid compounds to create repellents and dissolvers. Even musicians volunteered to compose signal disruptions in harmonic frequencies known to disorient hunter audio receptors. This wasn't war anymore. It was adaptation. One strike team on Velos, armed with nothing more than thermal cloaks and rail pistols, took down a hunter 3 times their size using bait and elevation. They scaled a cargo crane, triggered collapse, and used gravity as their weapon. The kill shot came from an improvised spike fired from a compressed air launcher, built from plumbing parts. Their message, recorded and transmitted before extraction, echoed across the colonies. We're not prey, we're problem solvers. The hunters, for all their strength, didn't know what to do with that. Their biology couldn't evolve. Their tactics were too ingrained. They weren't designed for long wars. They were designed to win fast, or not at all. The next time they tried a coordinated breach on a human installation, they found nothing. No walls, no resistance, just an abandoned station loaded with EM interference generators. The moment they entered, their internal trackers failed. One by one, they were hunted by drones operating on neuromimicry. It was reverse predation. The story of that counterhunt spread quickly among both sides. Humans began broadcasting audio pulses before major battles. Not warnings, rhythms, low, repeating sounds that mimic hunter territory markers. It was a challenge, and the hunters began hesitating. One of them, a scout-class variant, was captured alive, not for torture, for questions. It didn't speak, but it listened when shown images of ancient human cave paintings, figures hunting mammoths, spears, fire. It reacted, not in fear, in recognition. The truth was undeniable. This wasn't their first encounter with humans, not even their second. They had tested Earth across time, but the species they once stalked through primitive forests had changed. It had cities, ships, fire in its blood and logic in its mind. And now it had purpose. Earth Command released a public declaration across galactic networks. A single statement. We acknowledge the hunt. We accept the terms. But understand this, we do not fear extinction. We overcome it. It wasn't a bluff. It was history. From ice ages to empires, from collapse to rebirth, humanity had never stayed down. And now, in the cold dark between stars, that same stubborn fire burned brighter than ever. The hunters had come expecting prey. What they found instead was competition. They were called the 14, elite hunter alphas bred not just for war, but for eradication. Cloned from the most brutal bloodlines, tested in the vacuum of dead stars, trained to operate in absolute silence, absolute efficiency. When Skarnthrex unleashed them, it wasn't to win. It was to erase. Their mission: strike the heart of humanity's resistance. Not colonies, not outposts. Earth, no declarations, no warnings. They infiltrated the Sol system inside an asteroid shell, riding its natural trajectory until it slipped into low orbit under sensor range. The asteroid cracked open like an egg above the Atlantic. 14 void black capsules rained down, scattered across the planet. In less than 12 minutes, 3 deep-sea comm relays were destroyed. 2 weather-control satellites vanished from orbit. A defense grid over New Delhi went offline, followed by a sudden blackout across South America. All signs pointed to an extinction blitz. Old Earth should have collapsed. But Earth was no longer the center of humanity's presence. It was a fortress. And the hunters had just walked into a planet where every city was a trap. The first kill wasn't made by a soldier. It was a grandmother, a retired systems engineer in Sao Paulo who turned her basement into a private surveillance array. When the power went out, she bypassed the grid manually and spotted movement in infrared. One hunter, cloaked, moving fast. She didn't run. She triggered her personal defense system, built with scrap electronics and homemade EMP devices. The blast overloaded the hunter's camouflage. The neighborhood saw what she'd stunned. The local watch groups moved in. What followed wasn't military protocol. It was vengeance. The hunter died beneath 42 civilians armed with tools, flamethrowers, and raw fury. Similar scenes played out around the world. The hunters expected chaos. They got coordination. In Berlin, civilians used autonomous taxis to corner a capsule landing site. In Nairobi, drone hobbyists turned their fleets into air scouts. In Toronto, street gangs and retired special forces worked side by side, tracking hunter movement through sewer heat plumes. One capsule made it into the Siberian wastes, where it tried to establish a forward base. It was swallowed by an avalanche triggered by seismic charges, laid weeks prior, just in case. The hunters weren't fighting prey anymore. They were fighting billions of minds, each one thinking differently, adapting independently, creating a web of unpredictable resistance. Humans didn't wait for orders. They acted. 7 of the 14 were dead by the end of the second day. The remaining tried to regroup. They failed. Echo had anticipated the fallback pattern, tracked their comm pulses, lured them into a remote valley in Mongolia with false biosignals. What they found was a kill zone, automated railgun turrets, acoustic dampeners, and magnetic mines disguised as rocks. 2 more died. 1 escaped with half its limbs gone. The final 4 scattered. By now, Skarnthrex was watching, not from orbit, but from the command throne aboard the Hunkor Leviathan, a ship the size of Moon, cloaked in gravity distortion. It hovered just beyond the edge of the system, undetectable, waiting for its moment to erase Earth. Skarn had watched countless civilizations break. None had adapted like this. None had evolved under fire. He studied their broadcasts, their strange emotional fictions, stories of resilience, defiance, hope. He didn't understand hope. In the core of the Leviathan, he summoned the Hunt Council. His message was brief. Humanity is a contagion, one that does not submit. We will burn them now, or we will never undo what they become. But a new message came before they could act. Intercepted, human in origin. It wasn't sent by a government or a general. It came from a station deep in the Kuiper Belt, once a research post, now converted into an observation and long-range weapon calibration lab. The message was encrypted, masked through 50 satellite relays. but its contents were clear. A single sentence: "We know where you are." The Leviathan's cloaking field pulsed. For the first time in history, it was being scanned. Echo had found them, not by power signature, not by heat, by gravity distortions in dark matter fields, a method never used before in any known species. Humanity had made a breakthrough while under siege, and they weren't planning to wait. The fleet moved. Silent warships deployed from hidden slip fields in Jupiter's orbit. They didn't approach directly. They surrounded. Dozens of autonomous vessels, remotely piloted, armed not with brute force, but with disruption weapons, gravity lances, resonance torpedoes, temporal phase darts. The first shot didn't destroy the Leviathan. It scrambled its internal time loop buffer, a system the hunters used to anticipate attacks milliseconds before they occurred. The second shot severed its forward cannons. Then the fleet stopped. They left the hunters alive, not out of mercy, out of strategy. Earth Command broadcast another message. This is your last opportunity to retreat. You can leave, or you can join every other extinct predator in our history. Skarnthrex stood silent. Then he laughed. It was the first sound he'd made in years. He said, "They understand war." The Hunt Council panicked. Some urged escape. Others demanded counterattack. But Skarn realized the truth. The humans weren't bluffing. They didn't need to win. They just needed to make the hunters bleed. And bleeding was something Skarn had never been forced to do. On Earth, the last surviving capsule was found deep in the Mariana Trench. Crushed by pressure, its shell split. Inside, a dying hunter recorded its final vision. Human submersibles, not military grade, but civilian-made, using construction rigs modified for combat. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for permission. They ended it. Earth's oceans, its skies, its caves and cities. Every environment had become a battlefield where the terrain was designed for human dominance. That was the core truth the hunters had missed. They weren't just facing humans. They were fighting Earth itself. And Earth fights back. Skarnthrex watched as his Leviathan's outer hull quivered under barrage of human weaponry. The ship, the crown jewel of his species might, was buckling. Its once impenetrable cloaking field now ripped open by the unrelenting barrage of gravity distorters and phase disruptors. The internal chambers had begun to shake with the violent resonance of human-engineered weapons, an unnatural rhythm to a predator that had long thrived on perfect harmony and controlled chaos. The hunters were not used to this kind of fight, where unpredictability was weaponized and resistance didn't fold under pressure. They had underestimated the human will. But Skarnthrex still didn't fully understand it. He had seen it on a smaller scale, in isolated skirmishes, but never this unified, relentless force. They had drawn a line in the sand, a line forged not with advanced technology, but with the sheer determination to survive. And now, Earth's greatest weapon wasn't a fleet, a gun, or even a ship. It was its people, its collective will to fight for every inch of soil. Within moments of that first barrage, Earth's forces converged. The fleet, initially hesitant, grew bolder with every moment. Military commanders stood shoulder to shoulder with engineers and scientists, civilians who had no formal training in warfare, but had proven themselves adept at surviving the worst. The hunters could no longer predict human action because humans weren't acting within the cold confines of strategy. They were acting from their hearts, their homes, their families. The first major victory came as the Leviathan's outer shields flickered and failed. At that very moment, one of the human ships, a relic, a cruiser from the early interplanetary wars, launched its final, desperate strike. It wasn't with some experimental weapon or high-tech gadget. It was a simple, direct assault, a fusion-tipped torpedo aimed at the Leviathan's core reactor. The blast tore through the Leviathan's lower hull, puncturing its shield grid and sending a shockwave that knocked the hunters' communication systems offline. It wasn't the destruction of the Leviathan that won the battle. It was the message. Humans didn't rely on super tech to win. They relied on creativity, desperation, and almost primal drive to overcome the impossible. Skarnthrex roared in fury as the ship lurched and broke apart, fragments scattering like debris in a storm. But that wasn't the end. He knew it. Humans didn't stop, they escalated. On Earth, The human resistance wasn't just holding their ground. They were closing in. A long-range strike team under the command of Colonel Amina Jolly, once an astrophysicist, had been tracking the Leviathan's remaining power signatures, finding weak spots in the hull. She had spent years studying how to break a hunter's perfect cycle of self-preservation, and now, with only seconds to spare, she knew exactly where to strike. As her strike team hit the Leviathan's final exposed underbelly, a deep underground bunker beneath a city block was flooded with energy. It wasn't a bomb. It was an EMP charge, designed not to obliterate, but to erase the energy from within the Leviathan's artificial intelligence core, the true heart of its command structure. The result was instant. The Leviathan's tactical response system short-circuited. Internal subroutines froze. Skarnthrex, still intact and alive, now had to face something he could not anticipate: chaos. He had no command, no direction. His elite hunters, trained to precision, now floundered in an environment they couldn't process. They had always been superior in isolation, but now the galactic battlefield was theirs to lose. And they were losing. The human response was not some well-orchestrated military campaign. It wasn't a show of raw power. It was a pursuit of necessity. The hunters had underestimated human adaptability once. Now they would learn that underestimating humanity a second time was a fatal mistake. For every hunter that fell, for every soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice, there was another layer of humanity's defense. Entire sectors of Earth went dark, deliberate, strategic retreats to regroup. Humanity had turned every setback into an advantage. As hunter forces scattered, they found themselves on the run. One by one, their ships were disabled, either by sabotage or through sheer human ingenuity. The network of resistance had outsmarted them at every turn. When the hunters realized their strategy had failed, when Skarnthrex finally understood that the war was lost, it was too late. The resistance was everywhere now. From the oceans to the stars, from the depth of old cities to the highest orbiting platforms, humans had adapted and outpaced invaders. The final confrontation wasn't on the Leviathan. It wasn't even in space. It happened in the most unlikely place. The outskirts of an ancient city in Africa, where a small group of survivors, once hunters themselves, used old-world traps to turn the tide. There, in the ruins, the remaining hunters were cornered by a mix of battle-hardened warriors, civilians, and drones repurposed for one purpose: survival. They fought until there was nothing left of them, until only the sound of the wind and the hum of human voices filled the air. Skarnthrex stood alone, a towering figure among the wreckage of his fallen comrades. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected a species like humanity to survive, let alone win. He had come to Earth thinking it was just another hunt, but in the end he learned the harsh truth. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived in the face of extinction. As Skarnthrex's final breaths left him, the voice of Earth Command echoed over the galaxy. To the hunters, to the predators that thought they could erase us, we leave this final message. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not die. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And as the remnants of the hunter forces scattered into the void, they left behind more than just a lost battle. They left behind the recognition that humans were no longer prey. They were apex predators.